everybody, this is part 3 of my Alabama versus Oklahoma college football playoff semifinal preview. And today I'm going to talk about the rushing attacks for both Alabama and Oklahoma. I'm going to break down some statistics that I find important, and then I'm going to show you what that means and kind of some ending thoughts on the rushing attacks. So as per the other video, I'm going to start with Oklahoma because people are more familiar with Alabama probably on this channel, and then I'm going to do the Alabama stats. So buckle in. So first of all, with Oklahoma, one thing that I found surprising is that, it's not really surprising, but more so that I don't think the average person will assume that Oklahoma actually seems to be pretty run oriented or makes running a priority a lot more than people think. They actually ran the ball more than they threw it this year. Oklahoma had 495 rushes overall for 3,301 rushing yards. They had more rushing yards and attempts, only like by 3, but still more rushing yards and more attempts than Alabama, averaging 6.7 yards per carry, had 40 touchdowns, I think running the ball, which is crazy. Like, what in the world, how do you do that? Kennedy Brooks, who was a freshman, he's averaging 9 yards per carry. He had 113 rushes for 1,021 yards and 12 touchdowns on the ground. Lincoln Riley has said that Brooks sees the game differently than most running backs and has just this great combination of physical skills and physical ability as well. And so he seems to not only know how to play the running back position, but he has the ability to do it well at the same time. So he also had his season high against West Virginia, which was one of their last games of the season. So he seems to have gotten better as the year went along as well. So that's a good sign for him. Also, you can't forget about Trey Sermon, who, when I first saw him last year, when I was in the preview of the Oklahoma versus Georgia game, I was thinking like Trey Sermon looks like a running back that you would create on the NCAA football game. You know, he has like sculpted muscles, like no body fat. Seems like he can run right through you. It's like they're trying to find Adrian Peterson again, but he looks like a running back, and he's actually really, really talented. 155 carries this year for 928 yards, 6 yards per carry, and 12 touchdowns. Like I said, he just looks physically impressive, and it backs it up on the field here. Their third leading rushing, probably who you all would have expected, or maybe you would expect him to be higher on this list, is of course the quarterback, Kyler Murray. Had 123 attempts, but 892 rushing yards. They almost had 3 people with over 900 yards rushing. 7.3 yards per carry for Kyler and 11 touchdowns. So they had 3 people with over 11 or to at least 11 touchdowns rushing the ball. So it's crazy. The starter, the guy who would have been the starter this year, who was the starter to start the season, Rodney Anderson, who was really, really good last year. He was like Kennedy Brooks last year before Kennedy Brooks came. He went down with his, this is just really sad. I had to mention this because of like how unfortunate this is. His third career-ending injury, not career-ending, season-ending injury this year, and he would have been the leading rusher, I believe, if he was healthy. So Oklahoma's running attack seems to be quite dangerous. They have a lot of guys who are very talented and who can really do some great things with the ball. They have a great offensive line, of course, to help them pave the way for their running attack. Now, let's move on to Alabama's running statistics here. Alabama, with, like I said, they have a smaller amount of rushing attempts than Oklahoma, really enough, but only 3 less. 492 rushing attempts, but we do have less rushing yards overall. 2,628 rushing yards at 5.3 yards per carry, which isn't bad, actually. Both these running attacks are really, really good. If you're averaging 5 or more yards per carry, you're basically getting a first down every 2 times you're carrying the ball, which is crazy. And 31 rushing touchdowns for Alabama. The interesting thing about Alabama is that no one has more than 126 carries, and that's Damien Harris. So to put that into context for Oklahoma, the leading rusher for Alabama only has 3 more attempts rushing than Oklahoma's third leading rusher, Kyler Murray, who has 123 rushing attempts. That's crazy. So Damien Harris has 771 yards on 126 carries. He's averaging 6 yards per carry, 6.1. The backup, Najee Harris, kind of like dual starters at this point, 679 yards for 6.7 yards per carry, basically 7 yards per carry. And of course, Josh Jacobs, right out of Oklahoma's territory, of course, who no one recruited really until Alabama came in the picture at the end, with 495 rushing yards, over 5.3 yards per carry, and he has 11 touchdowns. So the third guy, like quote unquote third guy, leads the team in rushing touchdowns actually, which is something to behold. Like, he's a really talented guy, can do a lot of things, especially in the passing game too. Could have been a slot receiver if he wanted to be, I guess. But Alabama basically has 4 starters at the running position, and you may think, like, why did you say 4 when you only named 3 people? Because the fourth guy is Brian Robinson, who has 272 rushing yards, and he averages 4.3 yards per carry, and he doesn't get to play a lot. I wish actually that Brian Robinson got more carries. When he came against LSU, he ran over their star linebacker Devin White, and just to show you that, like, even Alabama's fourth guy can beat your starting linebackers, and at least in that situation, it's just really interesting to see. So Alabama basically has 4 starting running backs who split time, and one of them doesn't get enough carries, in my opinion. So if you break it down, Alabama has 3 backs over 5 yards per carry, 2 of them over 6 yards per carry. The third back leads the team in rushing touchdowns, and what I get from this is that it's just a great rushing attack that kind of is underutilized in some sense. So weirdly enough, both teams rely heavily on the run. You could even argue that running the ball is actually the priority. For sure, these teams are so explosive in the passing game that they score so quickly and efficiently without a million pass attempts that one could argue that it makes them seemingly, rather than actually, run-oriented. But if that were the case, they would seemingly keep passing the ball. I meant to say they were seemingly pass-oriented rather than run-oriented. You get what I'm trying to say? But you would think if that was the case, they would keep passing the ball even when they were ahead. But they run the ball a lot instead. So with that said, we don't know how many of Kyler Murray's 123 rushing attempts were originally passing attempts to begin with. But even if like half of those were original passing attempts, Oklahoma's rushing attempts still outpace the passing attempts by a lot. And so it goes to show you that both of these teams are a lot more run-oriented than you would think, based upon all the media coverage that the quarterbacks and the passing attacks have gotten over the course of this season. So one question I'm going to leave you with is, which rushing attack are you most excited to see? Which one do you think is better? And leave it in the comment section below. We'll talk about it. See you on the next video.